Hey guys, Tim here from Algonaut. Alright, everybody loves a good chord progression. I know I certainly do, but it can be tricky if you're new to producing to wrap your head around the sound design and music theory that you need to create epic chords in your track. I'm going to show you that with a few steps and tricks and just a little bit of music theory, it's actually pretty easy to come up with massive chord progressions. The kind of thing you hear across EDM and trance, pop music, Rocket League, and that kind of stuff. There are two sides to the coin when it comes to making big EDM chords, one being the synth patch or the sound, the other being the chord melody and the notes and stuff. And I'll show you both, as well as some processing tips as well. Remember, as part of these underground masterclass videos, at the end I'll give you a pack of all the patches, loops and MIDI and samples and things, so you can take them away and use them in your songs royalty free. Okay, let's get into it. So we're going to work with Massive for the sound. Massive is a real workhorse that just about everyone's got it. I also know it really well, and it's pretty capable of doing any sound. The principles apply to any synth, so if you want to use Silent or Serum or Spire or whatever, you can basically copy and paste the ideas across. But let's get into it. Alright, so we basically want to make a supersaw or hypersaw. That is not what we want. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is do a bit of routing. I'm going to change these filters around so we can use them both. So I'm going to put them into serial, turn up the volumes, and set the mix to mix 2. And change this first oscillator to a saw. So now we've got a simple saw going to filter 1, filter 2, and off to the master. Let's turn on some more oscillators. So I'm going to dial up oscillator 2 and set that to saw, and detune oscillator 2 just a little bit. Alright, that's a start. Let's down the third one as well. Saw wave, full amp, and we'll detune it the other way, just a few digits. Cool. So back to these filters, we want to choose a low pass filter of some kind. I'm going to use Daft, just because it tends to get quite nice and bright at the top, with a little bit of resonance for now. And for the second filter, we're going to use a high pass to kind of cut out and shape the lows of the sound, because we don't want to have heaps of bass in there. Alright, moving on. So we've got basically 3 saw waves, 2 filters, and that's it. Let's go to the voicing section. So over here, what we basically want to do is take a whole bunch of saw waves and stack them on top of each other and detune them to get that kind of hyper saw sound. So we can do that using unison. So what we want to basically do is let's try 8. We'll go 8 stacked oscillators. So they're all stacked perfectly on top of each other. And it kind of sounds weird because they're all static and in the same position. We want to change the max number as well, because by the time you make a chord progression, we're going to be using about 5 notes at once. So we need to have 5 times 8 potential voices, which is 40. Let's push that to 40. Now this might tax your CPU just a little bit, so you might want to go to the global section and dial the quality down to like eco or high. High is sounding a little bit better. I think my modern laptop can handle it, so we'll stick it at that. Voicing. Okay, so keeping it in polyphony, we now want to turn on pitch cutoff, and essentially what we want to do now is spread the tuning of all those voices slightly differently. So we're just going to dial the slider up, or better yet, just dial up the lower threshold just a few digits. You don't have to go very far. Okay, so just a little bit of detuning there makes it start to sound a bit thick. The next thing we might want to do is do the same thing with the pan position. So right now all the voices are dead center in the mix. We want to turn on pan position and push this to the right, away from mono. Cool, now that's starting to sound pretty hyper soy. What else can we do? Alright, let's check out the envelopes. We'll just change this master envelope, which is the 4th one, to attack to nil. That's all basically fine. We'll do a bit more release. Turn it down a fraction as well. Alright, we want to get some dust or some noise into this hypersaw as well, so we'll use the noise oscillator. So down here in the bottom left, it's already on white and it's already on. We're just going to dial this color knob to full and then dial in some amp. So not too much. That's too much. We're just going to maybe 9 o'clock position, just to get a little bit of noise in there. And that kind of tricks your brain into thinking that there's more notes higher up in the register. It just kind of makes it sound dusty and high and big. Yeah. All right, effects. That's the next thing we want to touch on. So let's go here. We'll just set the first one to, I mean, you can get creative with this as well, but essentially we want something that's going to spread and modulate the sound a bit. So maybe a flanger, maybe a phaser, but I'm going to use chorus. Dip down a little bit. And for the second effect, we're going to use a reverb. You need to have a bit of that. So turn on to reverb, make it the color a little bit dull, set the size a bit bigger. I'm just going to dial in the reverb just a little bit. Sweet. Then we've also got the EQ. So let's turn that on. So I find that to get your chorus to kind of sit back in the mix, but also sound big, is just to pull away some of the mids, and it kind of leaves room for the other sounds to cut through as well. So what we've essentially got here is a 3-band EQ with a low and a high shelf and a bell curve in the middle, represented by 2 knobs. So we'll leave frequency where it is and just pull the mids down. And maybe we'll also put the highs up a little bit as well. Kind of brings out that noise a little bit. Cool. I believe that's actually basically it. Oh no, one more thing, sorry, just to add a bit more analogness and depth to this as well. If you go to the oscillator section, we can also use some of this vibrato. So let's set the rate to midway speed and just dial in a bit of depth. So we'll go say 9 o'clock, too much, and pull it back down to 8 o'clock position. So with that vibrato going on now, every note's always going to be a slightly different tune, which means they're never going to overlap perfectly, and the whole thing's going to sound kind of lush. That's kind of what we want. Big, lush EDM hypersaw. All right, that's the basics of making a supersaw hypersaw massive. And now what we need to do is write the chord progression. And I've broken this down into about 7 steps just to make it easy to follow and to understand. And the first step is to choose your key and figure out what notes you can actually use. So there's a website here that I found called Los Senderos Studio, and they have this section called Charts and Graphs. And in Charts and Graphs, if you go here, you can click on minor scales. Now bear in mind, most dance music is written in the minor scale, so this is the one to look at. And here you see this table that shows you all the different keys on the left, and your keyboard notes represented along the top with black and white columns. And it just kind of covers the notes that are used for each key. So for example here, A minor, you can see that the root note is A, 1, and it's numbered 1, and then it's B, C, D, E, F, G, A, and then back to 1 again as it repeats. So the thing to notice there is that the A minor scale uses all the white keys, and that's really handy and makes it really easy, and that's how we're going to move forward in this tutorial. So if you don't know heaps about keyboards and pianos and stuff, just stick to the white keys and it will be an A minor, and you should be pretty safe. And you'll actually find, if you do a bit of research, that's why most dance music is actually written, not most, but a lot of dance music is written in A minor, just because it's so much easier to write in. Okay, so we picked our key A minor and we know what notes we're going to work in. So let's begin the chord progression. All right, I'm going to open up a clip here and we're going to start writing. So step 2 is to basically lay down the rhythm for the chord progression, and we're going to do that using a triad. So let's find A first of all. All right, there's A. So a triad is the first, the third, and the fifth note in the scale. So if A is the first note, the third note would be B, C, get A in, B, C, and the fifth note would be fourth, fifth, E. That is a triad, and that is quite loud. Let's dial that back a bit. Yeah, cool. So that's our basic triad. So we're just going to copy and duplicate this out now to create a rhythm. So let's say we'll just make this up. Just do that. What does that sound like? Might just change the tempo to 130. We'll chuck another one on the 8th at the end. Okay, so we want to do a 4-bar loop, so we have a bit of a progression going on. So I'm just going to duplicate this loop twice. So there we go, that's 4 bars. And that is essentially the rhythm for our chord progression, our epic EDM chord progression. So that's done. All right, so step 3 is to define the chord melody. So we're going to do that by basically shifting these chords up and down, making sure the notes are always staying in scale. So let's keep the first bar in A. Take the second bar and we'll just go up. 3. Alright, that sounds weird and off key because this middle note in the chord is actually now on a black key, so it's not in scale. So we'll just push it up as well into the A scale. Let's keep going up. We'll do this as well. Yeah, that last one was off. Put that in the note in the scale as well. All right. Okay, so that's your basic chord melody. We're just basically going up the scale in some ways. Just a bit of a pro tip when writing melodies. If you want people in the dance floor to put their hands up, have your melodies going up. If you want people to kind of get down with their legs and groove, have your melodies going down. It just seems to work for some reason. All right, so step 4 is to shape these chords using different chord shapes. So we've basically just done a triad. There's a triad the whole way across this chord progression. And that makes it sound quite predictable and a little bit, well, it's just a little bit boring. So we can actually, there are actually other chord shapes we can use. So back over on this handy dandy website, Los Enteros, there's another page here that describes all the chord shapes. So we've got major and minor chords, augmented, diminished, and suspended fourth and second. So we've actually used so far some major and minor chords. We've got a minor chord at the start. So the minor chord is a 1, 3 semitones up, and then the 5th note in the scale. And the major chord is the 4th note, sorry, the middle note is 4 semitones up. So we've got a minor chord, major, minor, major. But all those chords, because of what key they're in, where the root note is, they are all in the scale of A minor. So we've used minor and major chords in the scale of A minor to create that chord progression. But there are other chords in that. So where's our page? Down here. So we're not going to use these middle ones, augmented and diminished chords. They can work, but they're a little bit harder to get away with, especially if you're kind of new to doing chord progressions and stuff. But the suspended 4th and 2nd chords are pretty much easy wins, and they're really easy to punch into your progression. So bring this back over here. Cool. So if we go back to this first bar where we've done an A minor chord, so that's 1, 3, 5. Sounds kind of flat. A suspended 4th is when you take the middle note and you put it on the 4th note in the scale. So at the moment it's on the 3rd note in the scale. If you put it on the 4th note, that's a suspended 4th chord. A suspended 2nd is the same thing, but you put it on the 2nd chord in the scale. So there's 3 chord shapes right there, all in A, that are actually, you could actually make a chord progression with just that. You can go. Done. But obviously we've got different chord, a bit of a melody going on here as well. So let's punch in some different chord shapes into this progression to get a bit more musical. So what are we going to do? I think I'll keep the first bar as a triad. I know what I might do. I might take these two and put them down. 1 semitone, or in this case just 1 semitone, so it's on the 2nd white note, 2nd note in the scale. Let's do the same thing here. We'll change this one. Up. Do something different at the end. Down. Yeah, that adds some nice tension. Maybe we can go up there. Yeah, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll go up there and back down again. That sounds pretty good. All right, cool. So now we've done the old step 4, we've shaped the chords, they're not just boring triads. So now what we want to do is thicken these chords up. And our way to do that is to basically add another root note underneath all the chords an octave lower. So we'll just select, say, this root note here, A, for the first A chord. I'm going to hold down Alt, drag this down to the next A down on the scale, on the keyboard. What have we got? That does sound better. Let's do it with all of them. Using Shift to select, Alt drag down. It was there, I think. Sounding pretty good. We're getting there. Let's do it again. Next octave down as well. Why stop at 1 when we can do 2? Alright, this is actually really starting to sound quite good. Okay, it's pretty easy. Hopefully you can see it's not too complicated with a bit of steps and guidance. Anyway, what's next on the list? Inverting the chords. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is invert the chords. And this is good because what it can do is basically going to try and squish some of these notes together so they're not spread too far across the keyboard. And it can change the shape of the chords in a way that does sound lusher. It's kind of like tuning the chords a little bit without changing them. So to invert a chord, these are our chords here at the top. To invert a chord, what you're basically doing is taking a note on one side, so in this case, say the bottom note. If you go Shift up, we've now inverted that chord up. And you can do the same, obviously, going down as well. So take the top note, Shift down an octave. We've now inverted that chord down. What does that sound like? So say this is the normal one. If you invert up, sound higher, but it's still actually the same chord. Technically it's the same notes. You can actually invert twice as well, so we could say take two of the notes and shift it up an octave. That sounds pretty cool as well, but in this case it's just way too high, so let's do it the other way around. Take the top note down 1. That sounds quite thick and lush. Basically, we kind of pushed the notes a bit closer to the root notes. So that's good. Let's do it with all of them, in fact. Shift to select. Down an octave. Awesome. This is actually sounding quite decent. Alright, the 7th step is just flare. So now we're just going to kind of go through and just move a few little notes around. So what can we do? I feel this last one should go up a little bit. Alright, that's pretty good. Just a couple little notes here or there, mainly at the end, just to kind of lift it up at the end. And that is basically it for the chord progression. That's all you kind of need. And it sounds pretty decent. Alright, so I think the sound needs a bit of tweaking now. So let's go and just address that. All the notes sound a bit short, so there's two ways to kind of deal with this. We can either select all these and just make them a bit longer, or I can go cheap and cheerful and just chuck on note length, and then we have control here over the length of all the MIDI notes that come in. Essentially what this does is it takes the MIDI note, it ignores the length, and then it kind of forces the length to be whatever you set here on this knob. So we can dial that up. Sounds a bit fuller, and I think the release needs to be increased as well. So let's go over to the envelope. Huge. All right, I just realized while I'm looking at it, let's get some macros going on. So down here in the macro section, I'm just going to attach the first one to the cutoff for the low pass. Let's dial it back. So that's what it's going to be like at its lowest. Okay, so we can get a bit of an envelope to that. So we'll just chuck the first one on, set that to quite a low sustain, maybe quite fast decay. Bit open that release up as well. Push that up. Sweet. And then let's dial this macro amount up as well. I'll pop it open here for automation. And map it up to my LPD8. One of those knobs. Got a knob. Cool. Huge. Let's put a bit of polish on this as well. Kind of sounds like it needs it. So I'm going to go to our audio effect rack. We have got a thing here. Close that. Algo chord polish. So we use the UAD Universal Audio plugins. They just sound amazing. They're pretty expensive, but they get what you pay for. So this is my little polish for chords. So we've got a preamp. So this just adds some noise, some harmonic noise to the sound, makes it sound a bit grittier, a bit thicker, a bit fuller. Kind of boosted the lows and highs a little bit in there as well. And then we've got a compressor. So using the LA2A silver compressor just to kind of shape the sound, make it sound a bit stabbier, and also it thickens up a bit as well. And lastly, it's running into a SSL channel strip, again with another compressor on it, just to kind of rein in the tops, just if they peak a little bit too much, so quite a high ratio, and it kind of squishes it down a little bit and flattens the whole thing out. So with it all on, so that sounds pretty nice. With it off, a little bit flappy. Yeah, it's a little bit underproduced with it off. So yeah, you don't have to use these hard out plugins. You could just use basically a saturator of some kind, and a compressor of some kind, and then another compressor with a slightly more extreme but higher threshold settings. Okay, that's our chord progression basically done, and sounding pretty amazing. Now what? Now what would you do in your song? So let's add some more parts. Here's a bit of a pro tip as well. If you're writing a chord progression for a song, write the chords first, kind of like what we've done, because what happens is the more parts you add to a song, the harder it is to add a new part that fits with the rest. I mean, how many times have you written, like, say, drums, a bass line, your lead, and your vocals, and then you're like, oh, you know what this needs? A chord progression. And it's just impossible to write one that actually fits in with your music. It's because there's a lot going on with a lot of people with this chord progression. And it's way easier to write this first, and then you can come along and write your bass line, and then write your lead and stuff, and get your vocals last to fit around all of that. So yeah, chord progression first. Alright, so let's get a kick drum though. We do need a kick drum. I'm going to use, if you're writing EDM, I do recommend using Kick 2 from Sonic Academy. The kick is very important in EDM, that it's really punchy. Oftentimes it's actually half the bass line and it's in tune with the bass, so you got to make sure you can have the control to kind of edit it and stuff like that. And it really needs to be perfect. It's almost like less forgiving than, say, other genres like house, where you can just swap a kick out and it just sounds different, but it still sounds cool. EDM, the kick has to be perfect. I'm going to select a kick in here though, called Heavy Hands. It's actually not that big of a kick. I just like it. And let's get a melody down. Sorry, a pattern down. 1, 2, 3. Might make a few scenes here actually. So scene 1's just the chords. And let's get a sidechain going. Compressor. Sidechaining 2, kick 2. One other thing I might do as well with my little controller, I have this little Master Effects rack I use when I'm writing music, just so I can do like quick breakdowns and stuff and see how things sound. Just map that up. Alright. It's kind of like Data Life, Endless Smile. Kind of got uplifter, delay, a few just things you kind of need. So you can do this. This is really crying out for a bass line, so let's do that. Plugins, massive. Now I've got a bass patch I made. I'm not going to make one here in front of you because it will just take too long. I'll give this patch to you though as well. It's just a basic low subby kind of bass. It's too high though. Go down 24. I just realized something as well. What we could actually do is try changing the key of these chords as well. Bear in mind that this is all written in A, but you can just shift them up and down and it will work. So let's take all this. Does it sound too high or too low? Could probably even afford going up a little bit. Let's go from A to B. So it's 2 semitones up. Alright, so bassline. Let's put this kick over here. Sweet. Alright, so for the bass line, you kind of got a few options. Basically what you want to do is you want to follow the chord progression. It's easier. You can actually do contrasting melodies on the bass line as well, but you have to be a bit more careful. But we can easily just follow the chord progression and it'll be great. And then you've got kind of two choices. You can either have a bass line that kind of punches with the chords, or one that's just a big flat pad bass. So we'll try both. So what I might just do is just take this clip, drag it over to the bass. So this is the same clip. Maybe I'll color it differently. Yeah, and let's take all this stuff, which you don't need, just the lower notes. I think that's actually going to be too low. So solve this. Yeah, way too low. Select all, shift it up. Still too low. Alright, what does that sound like? A bit short on the release. I think it's going to sound better as a pad. Let's just take all these and drag them out. Is that too high? Sounds pretty good actually. Let's chuck on some side chain. It is a bit low, that first note especially. I take these first two and put them up. A bit more side chain. Let's do a bit of a fake drop. Alright, cool. So we've got a chord progression, a bass line, a kick drum, and now we just want some top drums to kind of round out the percussion. So I'm just going to use Atlas for that. Algonaut Atlas, new MIDI channel, new MIDI channel, MIDI. I'm just going to use Atlas here, just because it'll really quickly give us a top line with a new kit. So we want to go maps, Vengeance Deep House, sure. New kit, we'll get rid of the kick and the tom and the other sound. Go over to MIDI clips, let's just get house 1, that'll probably do. And what have we got? So that's without the drums. That's sloppy, try another kit. Might stop the clap in the snare round. New kit. That's quite nice. Alright. There you go. EDM chords. Not that tricky. Not that tricky at all. Basically, just to summarize, we've made a supersaw patch in Massive, which I'll give to you, and we basically made a chord progression, which was just stacking out some triads in a rhythm, shifting them around, adding some lower notes, doing some chord shaping, making sure to keep everything in scale, and then, yeah, Bob's your uncle. So what I'm going to do now, actually, let's record that chord progression into a new audio channel. So where is it? So remember that this has got all the UAD processing on it. So what I might actually do is chuck the sidechain onto this new channel. And then here, ins and outs, Massive, audio 2, audio 5, monitor to in. So that's just the chord progression there. I'm going to record that in so you can have it. And there you go. Let's give that a listen. Huge. And you can have that now to use however you want. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to fade to black, and I'm going to make 9 more chord progressions. Just going to quickly bang out 9 more patches and 9 more patterns, and record them all for you as well. So just give me a second. Alright, I'm back and I'm done. And that was a great time actually. So I've got 10 different chord progressions here. So 10 instances of Massive. And each Massive has a different patch that I made, slightly different, with a different chord progression down here in the pattern. And I've recorded 10 audio loops. So let's give them a listen. I'll play them all. So what have we got? So there you go. All of them epic, all of them yours. So I'm going to include the patches, all 10 patches, all 10 chord progression MIDI patterns, and all 10 audio loops into a pack. You can download that from the description of the video. You go to our website and grab that. Hopefully you followed all of that and found it interesting and learned a few things. You don't really need a chord plugin. I don't think so anyway. And this way you're actually creating your own chord progression that you can own and make into like an original hit. We'll see you next time on the channel. Make sure you subscribe. But yeah, catch you next time.